Once celebrated as the world's longest undefended border, the US-Canada frontier has suddenly become a flashpoint in North American relations. For generations, this border symbolized trust and cooperation, a place where families, tourists, and commerce flowed freely with little more than a wave and a smile. Now, Canada has abruptly sealed the main land route to Alaska, leaving travelers stranded and abruptly severing a vital supply chain that countless communities depend on. The closure has sent shockwaves through both nations, disrupting lives and livelihoods overnight. The White House is furious, scrambling to respond to what it sees as an unprecedented move by its closest ally. This isn't a routine closure. It's a calculated political maneuver with sweeping, unpredictable consequences for both sides of the border. Prime Minister Trudeau's government cites national security and environmental sovereignty as the driving reasons, closing key highways in British Columbia and the Yukon to nearly all U.S. traffic, with only rare exceptions. Tourists, commercial truckers, and even U.S. residents trying to relocate are being turned away, their plans upended with little warning. At border crossings like Abbotsford, chaos reigns. Long lines stretch for miles, confusion is rampant, and frustrated travelers search for answers as officers struggle to keep order. There are no easy alternatives. The Alaska Highway, more than just a road, is Alaska's lifeline and a powerful symbol of post-war cooperation. Its closure strikes at the very heart of a century-old partnership, threatening the flow of goods, people, and hope. The message from Canada is clear. The old rules no longer apply, and a new era of uncertainty has begun. For Alaska's 730,000 residents, the impact is immediate and deeply personal. Questions swirl about access to food, medical care, and the ability to see loved ones. The sense of isolation grows by the hour. The world is watching closely as a diplomatic winter descends, with analysts warning that the repercussions could echo far beyond North America. What was once a proud symbol of friendship and unity is now a stark line in the sand, dividing neighbors and nations. The Northern Blockade is in full effect, patrolled and enforced with a seriousness not seen in decades. The consequences are only beginning to unfold, and the world waits anxiously to see what happens next. On November 20th, 2025, Canada's Border Services Agency made a stunning announcement. It suspended all through traffic for U.S. citizens heading to Alaska via the Alaska Highway. The border, once a symbol of cooperation and open travel, was suddenly closed to thousands of Americans who relied on this vital route. The official reason given was unregulated, environmentally damaging transit, and a pressing need to reassert Canadian sovereign control over its northern border. Officials cited years of unchecked vehicle emissions, litter, and damage to sensitive wilderness areas as key concerns. Non-essential travel is now banned, but the term remains frustratingly vague. Many travelers, from families to seasonal workers, are left in limbo, unsure if their journeys qualify as essential or not. This dramatic move follows months of escalating trade disputes and rising tensions between the two countries, especially over environmental policy and the question of Arctic sovereignty. The Trudeau government is now leveraging Alaska's geographic isolation as a bargaining chip in a broader diplomatic standoff, hoping to force the U.S. to the negotiating table. Commercial trucking has been thrown into chaos. What was once a straightforward 3-day drive from Seattle to Anchorage now takes up to a week by sea, with costs for shipping and logistics soaring. Businesses are scrambling to adapt, and supply chains are under immense strain. Tourism, a lifeline for many communities in Alaska and the Yukon, has collapsed almost overnight. Hotels, visitor centers, and tour operators face an uncertain future. Canada insists this closure is temporary, but so far, no timeline has been offered. Officials say the border will only reopen after a new, stricter bilateral agreement is reached, leaving travelers and businesses in suspense. Canada is demanding sweeping environmental protections, strict inspections for all vehicles, and compensation for years of costly road maintenance along the Alaska Highway. The U.S. now faces a stark choice: negotiate on Canada's terms, or invest billions in a costly and time-consuming alternative route that could take years to complete. The ball is firmly in Washington's court, and the world is watching to see how American leaders will respond to this unprecedented challenge. The stakes have never been higher, with the future of cross-border relations, trade, and the environment hanging in the balance. The US-Canada border stretches for more than 5,500 miles, making it the longest international boundary in the world. It's a line that has long symbolized cooperation and connection between two nations. This border supports a staggering $700 billion in trade every year, with goods and services flowing in both directions, fueling economies on both sides. The Alaska Passage, though just a small segment, is a vital artery, an essential link connecting Alaska to the rest of the United States through Canada's vast wilderness. Annually, up to 200,000 vehicles, many loaded with food, fuel, and medical supplies, make the journey along the Alaska Highway, braving remote terrain and harsh weather. In fact, 30% of all consumer goods that reach Alaska's communities arrive by this crucial route, making it a true lifeline for the state's residents. If forced to rely solely on sea transport, costs could skyrocket by as much as 60%, putting immense financial strain on Alaskan families and businesses already facing high prices. Winter brings even greater risks. Shortages, empty shelves, and rising inflation threaten to disrupt daily life as supply chains falter under the pressure. Unlike previous closures, which were temporary and for public health, this shutdown is a political decision, with no exceptions for essential goods or emergency services. The closure doesn't just halt trade. It tears apart families, friends, and entire communities that have lived and worked together across the border for generations. The social and economic fabric, carefully woven over a century of shared history, now faces an uncertain future as connections unravel. The numbers paint a stark picture. Trade and travel have plummeted, and business owners are left grappling with anxiety and doubt about what comes next. Alaska's vital lifeline has been abruptly severed, leaving uncertainty and fear in its wake. For many, the consequences are deeply personal and profoundly unsettling, affecting livelihoods, well-being, and the very sense of community. The long-standing relationship between the US and Canada is now being tested as never before, with the world watching to see what happens next. Canada frames the closure as a defense of sovereignty and environmental integrity. Trudeau points to illegal dumping, unauthorized detours, and confrontations with US travelers as evidence of a system out of control. The move taps into rising Canadian nationalism, especially as the Arctic's strategic value grows. By controlling the Alaska Highway, Canada asserts its territory is not a shortcut, but a sovereign space. The Alaska loophole exploited during the pandemic left many Canadians feeling disrespected. Now, Ottawa is closing that loophole, betting on public support even at economic risk. Canada also cites the cost of highway maintenance, proposing a transit toll for US vehicles. For Canada, this is about politics, fiscal responsibility, and respect. The message: use our roads, help pay for them. President Trump's response was immediate and incendiary. On social media, he called Canada's move a total betrayal and threatened severe economic retaliation. At a press conference, he floated tariffs on Canadian auto parts and a review of all bilateral agreements. Trump's rhetoric turned a policy dispute into a public spectacle, making quiet diplomacy nearly impossible. Canadian public opinion rallied behind Trudeau, while Trump's base cheered his hardline stance. The conflict is now a test of national wills, with both leaders boxed in by their own words. The risk escalating tit-for-tat measures and deepening the rift. Allies are alarmed, and a swift resolution looks unlikely. The fire has been fueled, not doused. The closure's shockwaves hit hardest in local communities. Alaskan stores face shortages and price hikes. Yukon businesses see tourism vanish overnight. The economic pain ripples through North America's supply chains, disrupting industries from seafood to oil. The longer the blockade, the deeper the wounds. Globally, rivals like Russia and China watch the rift, sensing opportunity in a weakened North American alliance. The Arctic Council's balance of power is at risk. Alaska's military bases remain supplied by air and sea, but the loss of the land route exposes a strategic vulnerability. The closure shows a US state can be isolated by a foreign power, a sobering reality for Pentagon planners. The crisis is local, national, and global. The stakes extend far beyond the border. The world is watching. The pressure is mounting. U.S.-Canada relations have weathered border disputes before. The Alaska boundary dispute of the early 1900s saw both sides vie for control of key ports during the Klondike Gold Rush. The 1903 tribunal favored the U.S., leaving Canadians feeling betrayed and fueling a legacy of skepticism. The 1995 Turbot War showed Canada's willingness to act unilaterally to protect resources, even seizing foreign vessels. These episodes reveal a pattern. When sovereignty or resources are threatened, Canada pushes back. Today's crisis combines territorial and resource disputes, but in a hyper-partisan, social media-driven era. Quiet compromise is harder than ever. The scars of history linger. The current standoff is both old and new. Diplomacy is frozen as leaders play to domestic audiences. Traditional channels are sidelined by public posturing from Washington and Ottawa. Canada demands a new treaty with environmental safeguards and infrastructure funding. For Trump, conceding under pressure is unthinkable. Governors, premiers, and industry groups on both sides are pushing for a solution as economic pain grows. A third-party mediator or temporary reopening could offer an off-ramp. The crisis will end only when the political cost outweighs the benefits. Trust has been shaken. Rebuilding it will take more than reopening a highway. Canada's abrupt closure of the Alaska Passage has triggered a diplomatic and economic crisis. The move, rooted in sovereignty and environmental concerns, has upended trade and isolated Alaska. Trump's threats and rhetoric have escalated the standoff, making compromise elusive. The world watches as two allies face off, with global implications. The future is uncertain. Will tariffs cripple economies? Can diplomacy prevail? Or will the blockade become permanent? The Alaska Highway, once a symbol of friendship, is now a barricade. The crisis forces a reckoning with the fragility of even the closest alliances. As winter sets in, the question remains: when a border becomes a wall, can it ever be torn down again?